Hey y'all, time for supper.
Yeah, all right. I just gotta finish pushing this building. What the heck? Oh, dang. A few weeks ago, I was here talking about ancient European monasteries. In fact, ancient monasteries were See? And I talked about how some of those monasteries still produce and sell beer to fund their yearly operations. Many of those monasteries still use the sale of beer to fund their yearly operations. You see, I am a man of my word. Now, I'm sure that at some point in there you were asking yourself, well, hang on a second, where do all the hops come from? And boy, am I glad that you asked, because the answer is Hallertau. Hallertau is a region of Bavaria, Germany that produces approximately 24% of the world's hops. It is also the setting for the newest big box farming game by legendary designer Uwe Rosenberg. You know, I'd love to tell you that I'm a huge Uwe Rosenberg fan and I have a ton of his games. I'd like to tell you that I'm a big fan of agriculture and I just loves me some farming. Heck, I'd love to tell you that I'm just a fan of rural Germany, but the fact of the matter is, I love beer. And when this game was announced with the same name as one of the 4 German noble hops, I was excited at the idea of a big box Euro game about making beer. And really, besides these hop tokens and this brewhouse tile, there's really nothing about beer in this game. And that's okay. I still really like Hallertau, just not for the reasons that I thought I would. Like most big Euro games, Hallertau takes place over a limited number of rounds, with nearly a dozen phases in each round. Now, I'm going to start off talking about Phase 4, where you take turns placing workers on this central action board. Now, with every action that's taken, they become more expensive, requiring more workers to be spent. These actions will have you gaining new fields, acquiring crops, planting crops on those fields, acquiring new sheep, collecting wool from those sheep, or sending them off in exchange for meat and hides. And lastly, collecting clay. Now, you can also exchange your workers one-to-one for tools, which we'll get to in a moment. But after the actions phase, you'll improve the quality of unused fields, collect milk from your sheep, harvest the crops from all of your fields, and then you'll upgrade your village. Now, to do so, you'll be spending the resources shown on these tiles to move these tiles one space to the right. For example, upgrading the brewhouse requires barley and hops, but you must spend at least 1 more barley than hops. So in round 1, you'll only need 1 barley, but in round 4, you'll need 2 barley and 1 hop, gaining a discount for using 2 different types of resources. If you've managed to collect any jewelry, which is an intentionally difficult resource to acquire, you can spend 1 to upgrade any building with no additional costs. Upgrading a building slides it to the right on your player board, and once a complete column is visible between your buildings and the community center slides to the right as well. This means more workers can show up in the next round, and eventually you'll even start earning victory points with each upgrade. Now, about those tools I mentioned earlier, you see, if you had an abundance of resources, you could technically slide one of these buildings right off the side of the chart early in the game when the requirements are low. To combat that, I'd love to tell you that Uwe came up with an elegant, creative solution, but I'm not quite so sure that he did. You see, at the start of each round, you'll have these boulders. One that will sit 2 spaces in front of each building, and another one 2 spaces in front of that first one. To move a boulder requires using 1 tool, which thankfully is not actually discarded until the last round of the game. 1 tool lets you move a building 1 space, so the first upgrade of a building costs only the required resources. The second upgrade requires resources and 1 tool. The third and additional requires resources and 2 tools each. At the last phase of each round, these boulders magically rearrange themselves to the 2 and 2 spacing all over again. Now, I get why this was necessary. These boulders act as arrestor cables to keep players from getting ahead of the game's mechanisms. It's just not very elegant, and it's one of those things you'll find yourself apologizing for as you teach the game to new players. Now, back at Phase 1, you'll remove workers from the top row of each action space in a quadrant, with the number of quadrants varying based on player count. You'll then lose any sheep who are sitting on the current round card, activate any income cards, and you're back at the actions phase of the round. Speaking of cards, these might be the true gem of Hallertau. You see, there are 4 different decks of cards in this game. Gateway cards state a condition which must be met, but then grant additional resources without any actual costs. Farmyard cards will usually require a small cost of resources, but provide better rewards than the gateway cards. Bonus cards often require a moderate cost, but will provide income in the third phase of each subsequent round. And point cards usually have a high resource cost, but will provide loads of endgame victory points. I think it's safe to say that Uwe's games are known for being big, complex, crunchy games that require players to meet stressful demands of feeding a family or a fleet full of Vikings. Hallertau is no exception, as you have to meet the increasing demands of your little farming village, and yet the game just feels so chill. Maybe it's the fact that the increasing demands of each round are so clearly defined. Maybe it's the discounts that each round offers. Maybe it's the fact that many of these actions provide similar benefit. Or maybe it's the variety of options available for most of these buildings. Somehow, all of this variety makes the game feel conquerable, even in the face of increasing demands. My first few games of this I played solo, and if you're wondering how complicated the solo rules are, you can see all of them right here. The challenge of the solo game is that only one quadrant has any workers removed from it in each round, which means you can't keep relying on the same actions to build up your resources. You're going to have to try new things as you go through the game. Luckily, you don't have to worry about losing out on an action to another player that you've been saving to use for just the right moment. This lets you get the most out of each action that you take, and you'll have to do that because the goal of 100 points is not easy to beat. I have a theory that at higher player counts, the scores of Hallertau get a little lower, as more players are fighting over those same actions. I tested this theory out with my wife, but managed to tie my highest solo score. Now, it's worth pointing out that my wife scored a little over half as many points as I did, so my theory does not remain unproven. However, I found it interesting just how relaxing the game felt. We rarely stepped on each other's toes, which may be a result of her playing a little less efficiently than I did. But I liked that we had no idea who was winning until the end. It was also pretty nice I was able to teach her how to play by playing a solo game myself. I personally find it pretty hard to rank games one over the other. I love a big complex strategy game, but they're not always fun to set up or to teach or to sit there waiting while someone else takes their turn. Now, it's very possible that Hallertau slows down a good bit at 4 players, and I don't know when I'm going to get to test that theory. But honestly, I can't think of any reason that would deter me from wanting to get out this game and play it. Oh, and since this is Tabletop Toolbox, here's an easy tip. A few dollar store snack containers makes organizing this game a breeze. I think setup takes something like 5 minutes, and with a game that says expert level in the box, that's pretty hard to beat. Personally, I think Hallertau is excellent. With the exception of the silly little boulders, the game makes a lot of sense, and I like that the challenge lies solely in the strategy, not in trying to understand the game's mechanisms. I love that it plays the same for 4 players or just for 1, and I love how the game is crunchy yet casual at the same time. So that's Hallertau, an excellent game from a designer with an equally excellent reputation. Now, if like me you're looking for something with a little bit more of that beer theme, then check out my Beery Board Game Bash videos here on YouTube. I think you'll find something to your liking there. But don't be afraid of the farming theme of Hallertau or that expert level moniker on the box. I think there's something here for just about everyone. Cheers.